Hello friends, this video on transitive and intransitive verb part 1 is brought to you by ExamFear.com. No more fear from. Before we start discussing about transitive and intransitive verb, it is important that we do a quick recap of verb. So as we know that verb is a word that describes an action or state of being. Now what does that mean? Now anything that we do, so that action is verb, or anything that exists and that state of being or that existence is verb. Let us look at this example. The kids were dancing in the party last night. So if you look at this sentence, what is the action? What were the kids doing? So they were dancing. So were dancing is the verb here because it shows the action which was done by the kids. So here the verb tells us what a person or thing does. So a verb can either tell us what a person or thing does, or it can tell us what is done to a person or thing. What is done to a person or thing? Let us look at this example. The flower vase is broken. So here it doesn't tell us what the flower vase is doing, but it tells us what is being done to the flower vase. So the flower vase is broken. So here is broken is the verb. Or it can also tell us what a person or thing is. For example, if we say Sanya is a smart girl. So here we are not really telling what is Sanya doing. So we are not talking about any action here, but we tell what is Sanya. So Sanya is a smart girl. So is the verb here. So in this case, it is not describing an action, but it is describing a state of being or state of existence. What is Sanya? Sanya is a smart girl. So is a verb in this case. So what we understand is a verb can either tell us what a person or thing does, or it can tell us what is done to a person or thing, or it can tell us what a person or thing is. Okay, let's look at a few more examples. The baby sleeps quietly. So here, can you tell me which is the verb? So what is the action that is being done here? So sleeping is the action because the baby is sleeping. So sleeps is the verb. One more example. There is a beautiful house behind the shop. Now again in this sentence we are not talking about any action, but we are talking about a state of being, something which already exists. And what is it? It is a beautiful house which is there behind the shop. So here is the verb which tells us that okay, this exists. This beautiful house behind the shop exists, right? So is a verb here. Now let us talk about transitive verb. So what is a transitive verb? Before that, we will look at some of these sentences. He kicked. So if I ask you, does it make sense? It makes some sense because we understand, okay, he kicked something. But what does he kick? That we do not know. So we can say that this sentence makes sense, but it doesn't make complete sense. Similarly, if you look at this one, the teacher called. The teacher called whom? The teacher called what? We do not know. So this is again a sentence with partial meaning. Aditi spoke. What did she speak? What did she talk about? Again, we do not know. So if you look at each of these three examples, you see that these sentences, they make some sense, but they do not make complete sense. However, if we add something after the verb in each of these sentences, then they make they make complete sense. For example, he kicked the football. So now what did he kick? He kicked the football. So if you look at this sentence, he is the doer of the action because he is the one who is kicking. So he is the subject here. Kicked is the verb here. And what did he kick? He kicked the football. So what is the football? It is the object here. So we have already learned about subject and object. In fact, we have also learned how do we identify an object. Now, if we ever come across a verb which has an object and a verb such that the action of the verb is transferred directly to the object, then it is called a transitive verb. For example, in this case, he is kicking. And who is experiencing that kick? The football is experiencing the kick. That means the action is being directly passed on to the object. So these type of verbs are called transitive verbs. Let's look at the next example. The teacher called Ritu's parents. So the teacher is the one who is calling, who is doing the action. So it is the subject. Called is the verb. And the teacher called whom? So the teacher called Ritu's parents. So this is the object. So here again you see there is a verb which is kind of linking the subject and the object. So whatever is being done by the teacher, that impact is directly on the object. So the teacher is calling, and who is getting called? Ritu's parents. So these kind of verbs are called transitive verbs. Now the next question that comes to your mind is, how do we identify an object? Because what we understand here is, in order to identify a transitive verb, it is important that we know that there is an object in the sentence, because the transitive verbs always require an object. So how do we identify object in any sentence? So for that, we will have to ask a question, what or whom? For example, he kicked what? So the answer would be football. That means football is the object. The teacher called whom? The answer is Ritu's parents. So Ritu's parents is the object. Aditi spoke what? She spoke the truth. So truth is the object. So this is how we identify object in a sentence. And in a similar way, how do you identify subject? For that also you will have to ask what or who. For example, who kicked the football? He kicked the football. So he is the subject. Who called Ritu's parents? The teacher called Ritu's parents. So the teacher is the subject. Who spoke the truth? Aditi spoke the truth. So Aditi is the subject. Right? So in each of these three examples, we see that the verb connects a subject to the object, and the verb acts in such a way that the action is transferred from the subject to the object. So a transitive verb denotes an action that passes over from subject to an object. In fact, that is why they are called transitive verb. Transitive, the word is derived from the word transition. Transition means transfer. So here the action gets transferred from the subject to the object. Let's look at a few more examples. So now we will try to look at a little more different or complex sentences. For example, my watch has been stolen. Now, if you look at this sentence, because normally whenever we have to identify a transitive verb in a sentence, the first thing that we will look for is the object. So we will first check if there is an object in the sentence. So if there is no object at all, then obviously the verb is not a transitive verb. But in this case, the sentence is in passive voice. Now, in passive voice sentences, the format is such that sometimes some of the things are hidden. For example, if you try to write the same sentence in active voice, what will you write? You will say that someone has stolen my watch, right? But in the passive form, you will not say that my watch has been stolen by someone. We generally say my watch has been stolen. So that means that by someone is actually hidden in this sentence, correct? So therefore, all the sentences in passive voice, they have transitive verbs. So this is something which you can actually remember as a rule. Whenever you come across any sentence in passive voice, the verb in that sentence, for example, stolen in this case, is a transitive verb. The flower vase is broken. This is again a sentence in passive voice, and therefore broken is a transitive verb again. So in passive voice, all verbs are transitive. This is a very, very important rule. The teacher gave me an award. So in this case, the verb is gave. Obviously, gave shows an action. Who is giving? The teacher is giving. So the teacher is the doer of the action. So the teacher is the subject here. And what is the teacher giving? The teacher is giving an award. So award is the object here. And whom is the teacher giving an award? The teacher is giving an award to me. So me is also an object here. But in this case, award is the direct object and me is the indirect object. Now, I will not get into the details of direct and indirect object. If you want to know more about them, you can actually have a look at the video on direct and indirect object. That will help you. Okay, so in this case, again, we see that there are objects after the verb, which shows that this verb gave is a transitive verb. Let us now talk about intransitive verb. So obviously, as the name suggests, that it is exactly the opposite of transitive verb. So they denote an action that does not pass over from the subject to the object. Now, one very easy way to identify whether a given verb is transitive or intransitive is that you first identify the object. If there is no object at all, then most likely it is going to be intransitive verb. Let us look at this example. The children laughed loudly. So here, laughed is the verb. But do we have an object here? So let us ask the questions. Laughed what? Do you get an answer? No. Laughed whom? Do you get an answer now? No. So that means loudly is not the object here. Loudly just tells how did the children laugh. Right? So that means here in this case, we do not have an object, and therefore this is an example of intransitive verb. Let's look at the next example. The train stopped suddenly. Now the stopped here is the verb, but again, do we have an object? Let's ask the same questions. The train stopped what? No answer. The train stopped whom? No answer. So here suddenly is again just a word which tells how did the train stop. So here this stopped is again intransitive verb. Now let us say if we had a question, if we had a sentence like this, the train stopped me, or the train stopped by me, or the train stopped near me, something like that. So in that case, or let's say that if we are trying to say that there was a train and the train made me stop, right? So the train stopped me, something like that. So in that case, if you ask the train stopped whom, the answer would be me. Or the train stopped what? So you get an answer. So in that case, you say that you have an object. But otherwise, in this case, stopped is an intransitive verb. Let's look at another example. Now, sometimes what happens is there are certain verbs which acts like a transitive verb as well as an intransitive verb. For example, Rohan kicks the football. So in this case, if we ask a question, so obviously who is the doer of the action? Rohan. So Rohan is the subject here. Now, if we ask a question, Rohan kicks what? The answer is football. That means football is the object here. So it's quite obvious that in this case, kicks is a transitive verb because the action, the kicking is getting transferred from the subject Rohan to the object football. Whereas if you look at the next sentence, the baby never kicks. Now here if you ask a question, the baby never kicks what? Do we have an answer? No. So in this case, kicks is an intransitive verb because here anyways you do not have an object, right? Now this is not the only example. If you look at this example, feel is a verb which acts as a transitive verb as well as an intransitive verb. For example, I feel a severe pain in my stomach. So in this case, I is the subject. Now if I ask a question, I feel what? I feel a severe pain. That means this pain is the object in this case. So feel here is a transitive verb. But when you ask a question, how do you feel? So there you do not have an object and therefore this feel is an intransitive verb. One more example, Aditi spoke the truth. So Aditi is the subject. Aditi spoke what? She spoke the truth. So you have a subject, you have an object. So spoke in this case is transitive. But when you say the silent boy spoke suddenly. So here the silent boy is the subject. But he spoke what? That we do not know. He spoke whom? That we do not know. So suddenly just tells us how did the boy speak, right? So therefore here you do not have an object and therefore spoke here is intransitive. So not only this, there are a couple of verbs like stop, spoke, kick, feel, So these are all examples of verbs which can behave like a transitive verb as well as intransitive verb. Therefore, never judge a verb just by what it is. Like, you will always have to understand how exactly the verb is being used in the sentence. Now, whenever you are dealing with transitive or intransitive verbs, your first step would be to identify the object in the sentence. So if you are able to identify the object, 70% of the work is done. So after that, you will be very easily able to identify whether the given verb is a transitive verb or an intransitive verb. Thank you. Please visit ExamFear.com for free quality education. You can learn with a simple 4-step learning process wherein you can watch video lessons, you can ask your questions, you can refer notes, and you can take a free online test. We have content for class 6 to 12 on physics, chemistry, mathematics, and biology along with practical videos. So please subscribe to our channel for daily updates. Thank you.